How many of you here either have or were a kid? Show of hands. All right. There's always one guy that won't raise their hand no matter what you ask, right? Not only was I a kid, but I have 4 of them. Let me tell you why that's relevant to you. Because each one of us has a small, oftentimes seemingly insignificant sentence, but it becomes our operating sentence. It's either true or false, and it directs our entire lives. Now, I told you I have 4 kids. It's 4 daughters, actually. They're all teenagers as well, just FYI. They are here with me today, and if you're wondering what that's like to be the dad of 4 daughters, it's exactly what you think. All right? It's, Wi-Fi and hormone-powered chaos just at our house all the time. So the volume's always high, and in the midst of that, we make some great memories. The other night, we were having dinner at the table, my wife and I and all the girls, and then it happened. Confession broke out. One at a time. They were even taking turns. It was a miracle. They started to confess lies they had told. Lies to their classmates when they were younger, to teachers, even to us. And most of them were funny. Some of them were outrageous. And then one of my daughters blurted out, almost casually, like she could feel this was her chance. She's never had a terminal illness. She said, I told my entire 6th grade class I had cancer. Well, that was a lot of years ago. I just looked at my wife like, what have we done? I'm a man who's dedicated my life to helping people walk in truth, and I'd raised professional liars. And the truth is, we all lie. Some of you might be thinking to yourselves right now, well, not me. That's the first one you've told yourself today. But lying, we know it's bad for us. It's a universal truth that we think it hurts relationships. Some of you have probably been betrayed or lost relationships because of lying. And some of you know that you've been covering lies, and so it causes you to hide. And it's detrimental, but we still do it. It's like that fast food trip at midnight, and they ask you, do you want to supersize it? You still say yes. You know it's a bad choice, but you do it anyways. We all do. But one of the problems that many of us have is that we think that the lies that ruin lives are the ones that capture headlines. Sex scandals, Ponzi schemes, corporate cover-ups. What if I told you that most lives are not shattered by headlines and scandals, but are directed by that operating sentence? And sometimes it's just a whisper. For some of you, it was a lie that you told yourself, like, I only matter if I perform. For others, it might have been something someone else said to you. You're just like your mom, and it wasn't a compliment. But then you wear it and you keep it. So what do? Well, for some of us, we build great lives on that. But I want to tell you that you can build a life that's successful, that even you get respect for, maybe you even receive love because of. But if it's built on a lie, it'll always leave you empty and eventually exhausted, unless you get real. And that's why I've titled this talk, The Lie That Built You Will Break You Unless You Get Real. And I'm going to tell you how. To get real is actually a tool designed to help you live the life that you were meant to live. You see, one of the problems with living according to a lie is that we live a life that was never meant to be ours. And REAL is an acronym. The R is for read the signs. The E is to evict fear. The A is to anchor to truth. And the L is to live unleashed. The R, to read the signs. Well, what are the signs? The signs are the emotions that we have in our lives. And we all have different emotions. We've laughed together already here, and some people are good at expressing emotions. Some people are good at suppressing emotions. We entertain ourselves and numb emotions, but do you know how to read them? You see, a lot of times people talk about facts and feelings as if they're competitors with one another, and they actually work together in our lives. Your feelings are like an internal GPS system, like road signs. They point you and they direct you eventually to your operating sentence. And I didn't know that until in my own life. I started dealing with imposter syndrome. Where did it come from? How long had it been there? I don't know. As I look back and talk to my therapist, I think maybe it was in first grade when I got held back and I felt like everybody knew something I didn't know. Or maybe it was sixth grade when my teacher told me, we should hold you back, but we're moving you along anyways. And again, everybody knows something I don't know. And then as an adult, I'm originally from the Midwest. Everything's simple, meat and potatoes and direct statements. And I got dropped into the South, which is a land, just so you know, of foreign customs. Etiquette, cotillion, white gloves. I didn't know what was happening. And people would say phrases. I didn't know I needed to learn a new language. They'd say things like, bless your heart. I thought that was an act of compassion. I was being called an idiot. It's again, everyone knows something I don't know. And that was the lie I built my life on. It's true, everyone here does know something about something, regardless of your age or expertise, that I don't know, but there's more to the story. And so taking the deception of lies that's so difficult is that a percentage of them is always true. But even if it's just that last 10% that's twisted, it can send you way off course. And for me, what it did is it put me in a spot where I began to become what some people would refer to as a workaholic. 70, 80-hour weeks were nothing, maybe even 100-hour weeks periodically. And why did I do that? Because workaholism in our culture is oftentimes told, you shouldn't do that, that's wrong, but then they pat you on the back for doing it. Well, I kept doing it. And what happens is that you eventually see is even if you're successful, you can't enjoy it because you feel like a fraud. And so I started a church and a movie theater, and a bunch of people came. They seemed to like my preaching. Hundreds of people could come up to me and tell me how much the message mattered. But there was one voice that mattered more, and it was a whisper, oftentimes right before I'd step on stage. And it would whisper, if they really knew, no one would listen to you. But not because of a scandal, not a cover-up, because of that operating sentence that was directing my life. Imposter syndrome is not a clinical diagnosis, but there have been many studies on it. The most commonly cited study was from 2007, and it's estimated by that study that up to 70% of adults experience imposter syndrome at some point in their life. Maybe that's not the lie for you. Maybe it's that you have to be perfect. Maybe it's that you have to perform in order to be loved, that you're not enough. Maybe it's some toxic narrative, a shadow story that you tell yourself that's maybe somewhat true, but not all the way. Regardless of what the lie is, it will lead you to live a counterfeit life. And the cost of living a counterfeit life is too high. So you got to read the signs. For me, it was exhaustion. And I was exhausted trying to be what I thought everybody else wanted me to be. But here's what I know. Being yourself is not exhausting, it's energizing. So I had to read the signs. And then, evict the fear. Why am I talking about fear? Why fear? Aren't we talking about deception? Oftentimes what you find is that behind self-deceptive statements is a fear. Could be the fear of failure, could be the fear of loss, could be the fear of rejection, the fear that you won't have control, the fear that you'll be found out. Lots of fears. Fear is what drives high performers to keep chasing titles, to put another zero in the bank account, to get that promotion or just an attaboy. Fear is what tells the insecure person, don't try. Because then everyone else will know what you already know to be true. You're not enough. Fear is what keeps parents saying yes to everything their kids want and going to all the things because rest is weakness, right? Fear oftentimes fuels the lies. It must be evicted because it's like a squatter. It lives rent-free in our minds. We've got to evict it. Do y'all remember Lance Armstrong's 7 Tour de France wins? I think they were all in a row. And there was that famous interview he did with Oprah where he confessed his lie, something that was pursuing him much of his career. And he told everybody he really did use performance-enhancing drugs. Most people know that. What many people don't know is that 5 years earlier, when he was making a comeback, he did an interview with Vanity Fair magazine. And in that interview, he talked about his motive for really everything he does. And he said it was a fear of failure. You see? There's the lie we saw, but fueling the lie was the fear. You've got to evict the fear. How do you do that? Well, that takes us to the A in R.E.A.L. Anchor to the truth. Not just a wish, not what you hope would be true, not some positive vibe, not some thought that you come up with, but what's factually true, because storms come in life. And the storms can be global pandemic. Anybody remember that? Learn some stuff about yourself in those times. It can be the loss of a loved one. It could be the loss of a job. Any shattered dream can be a storm. The mistake many of us make is that we think that the storms in our lives are what causes damage. The storms don't cause damage. The storms reveal to us the leaks that are already in our boat. And so what we must do is get anchored. For me, what happened is that I'm working all these hours, got workaholism going, got some perfectionistic tendencies. I started going to a therapist. And after several months of telling him stories that were basically the same story over and over with different names and different contexts, he leaned in and he said, Scott, your life is like going to one of those fancy dinners. You know, the kind with like 9 forks and all the different plates. And he said, and you're looking around and it seems like everybody else knows when to use which fork. And I'm going, yes, exactly. And then he said, after a long pause, and I swear the pause is what changed my life. He said, none of us know. We're all just figuring it out. And when I heard that, something broke. But not broke bad, it broke free. It broke free from the perfectionism, broke free from being in bondage to learn because I was behind. Now I could learn because I was curious. I'd work not because I had to prove something or catch up, but because there can be joy in the work. And what I ended up realizing was there were a lot of adults improvising in a lot of situations. I've told my kids, those 4 daughters, hey, I've never done this before. We're figuring it out. But what I've seen is that those that are comfortable with the tension of not knowing are anchored to truth. Those that are pretending and might be incredibly successful eventually are exhausted. And I want you to have the joy of being anchored to truth so that you can live unleashed. Unleashed doesn't mean there's no limits on your life. Unleashed means there's no lies directing your life. Imagine with me that Monday you go into work and you're not there to get a paycheck. You're not there to get an attaboy. You're not there just to put more money in the bank account. Imagine going because you've been called to it and you're on mission while you're there. Imagine then when you get home, you're fully present with your family because you're not chasing worth outside the home. And then imagine the next morning waking up and looking in the mirror and liking the person you see. You see, that's what it is to be unleashed. You know, I told my wife after about 15 years of doing the 78-hour weeks, I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I think I'm burning out. I took a sabbatical, 12 weeks. After the sabbatical, I came back and I told the board at my church, I said, I learned a lot about myself, and one of the things I learned is I think I can be pretty good at making everybody like me by doing what they want me to do, but I don't like me. And I'm not going to do that anymore. I said, I don't know if I can do this job and be myself, but I'm going to be myself anyways. It was risky. Could lose my job. But I'm going to tell you, it's better. Because I would rather have a life rebuilt on truth than one that has a bigger platform, maybe more accolades or success, but it's built on a lie. What about you? I asked my daughter if I could share her cancer confession at the dinner table. And at first she said, no, Dad, spare my dignity. And then she volunteered one of her sister's stories that I could use in my talk. And we talked through some of the details of that. But she came to the realization, if I share my story, maybe somebody else would feel the freedom to share their own. Because some people, it's an imposter syndrome. Some people, it's a toxic narrative. Some people, there's a shame cycle. And just being known can be a step into freedom, to being unleashed. And maybe for you. I bet each one of us, just listening to my talk, have thought about a lie that you've believed. Maybe you're part of the 70% and connect with the imposter syndrome and feel like people might figure it out. I want you after this talk to write it down. Maybe you've got a toxic narrative, a shadow story, some lie that's directed, and I want you to write it down. And then I want you to ask yourself the question, if one of my friends thought this, what would I say to them? Because you know that we'll do more for other people than we'll do for ourselves, right? Okay. Then why don't you be friendly to yourself? cross off the lie and begin to fill it with truth. I'll be honest with you, when I got invited to do a TED Talk, I was pumped. And then I saw who all the other speakers were. And I thought, they're all so smart. I don't belong here. And so even now that I know the truth, there's still some struggle. But you know what I tell myself when I start to think those thoughts? I've got something to contribute, or else I wouldn't have been invited. So maybe for you, it's, I'm not enough. Well, you're in progress. Or maybe it's, if they ever found out, maybe the best thing you could do is tell somebody. Because now you're not hiding. And now you can be unleashed. I've told you how to get real. You read the signs. The signs are our emotions, and they point us to that operating sentence. Evict the fear. It's like a squatter. You got to get it out of there. Anchor to the truth because it sets you free so you can live unleashed. So let's rise up and get real because you were meant to live unleashed and on mission. Thank you.